For 700 years, two titans had clashed across the known world, Rome and Persia, west and east, the eagle and the lion. They had fought over cities, over trade routes, over pride. But in the year 602, something changed. This would no longer be a war of borders, it would be a war of annihilation. The Roman Emperor Maurice, who had once saved the Persian throne, was butchered in front of his own sons by a blood-soaked usurper named Phocas. The Persian king Khosrow II swore vengeance, not just for land, not just for gold, but for the death of the man he called father. What followed was 26 years of unrelenting slaughter. Syria burned, Egypt fell, and in the spring of 614, Persian soldiers stormed into Jerusalem and seized the most sacred relic in all of Christendom, the true cross, the wood upon which Christ himself had died. To the Romans, it felt like the apocalypse, the end of days. Two empires, drunk on centuries of hatred, would now fight until one of them ceased to exist. But neither could have imagined the truth, that this war would not crown a victor. It would dig a grave large enough for both of them. If you want to witness the most catastrophic war of the ancient world, hit that like button and subscribe. Because what you're about to hear is the story of how two superpowers committed suicide together. To understand the apocalypse, you must first understand the betrayal. The year is 602. For nearly a decade, the Eastern Roman Empire, which history will one day call Byzantium, has been locked in a grinding war along the Danube frontier. Slavs and Avars pour across the river, raiding and burning Roman villages. The Emperor Maurice, a capable but ruthless strategist, orders his exhausted legions to winter north of the Danube, deep in hostile barbarian territory, to save on rations. The soldiers are furious. They've been underpaid, overworked, and now they're being told to freeze in enemy lands while the emperor sits warm in his palace. The army mutinies. They proclaim a middle-ranking officer named Phocas as their new emperor. Phocas is everything Maurice is not. A brutal, uneducated soldier with a taste for blood. The rebel army marches on Constantinople. Maurice flees across the Bosphorus with his family, but there is no escape. Phocas's men catch them. On November 27th, 602, Maurice is forced to watch as his 6 sons are executed one by one. Then they kill him. It is a crime that will set the world on fire. Across the border, in the opulent palaces of Ctesiphon, the Persian king of kings receives the news. Khosrow II, known as Khosrow II the Victorious, is grief-stricken. Maurice had not merely been an ally. 12 years earlier, when Khosrow had been overthrown by a usurper named Bahram Chobin, it was Maurice who gave him shelter, who lent him a Roman army, who restored him to the peacock throne. Maurice had been his benefactor, his friend. Some sources even say his father-in-law. And now Maurice's head was rotting on a spike in Constantinople, placed there by a low-born thug who called himself emperor. Khosrow does not hesitate. In 603, he launches the largest invasion in Persian history. Officially, it is a war of vengeance, a righteous crusade to restore Maurice's son, young Theodosius, to the Roman throne. But everyone knows the truth. Khosrow wants it all. Every Roman city east of the Bosphorus, every grain field in Egypt, every trade route to India. This is not a punitive raid. It is a war of conquest. And Rome, bleeding from civil war and ruled by a paranoid tyrant, is in no position to stop him. The Roman frontier in Mesopotamia collapses almost immediately. Narses, the governor of the province, refuses to recognize Phocas and invites the Persians in. The great fortress city of Dara falls in 604 after a months-long siege, then Amida, then Edessa. Phocas, more concerned with hunting down political enemies in Constantinople than defending the eastern provinces, does nothing. His generals are incompetent or dead. His soldiers are demoralized. The Roman Empire, which had stood for 1,000 years, is beginning to disintegrate. By 610, even Constantinople has had enough. A revolt breaks out in Carthage, led by Heraclius the Elder, the Exarch of Africa. His son, also named Heraclius, sails a fleet to the capital. On October 5, 610, the younger Heraclius storms the imperial palace, drags Phocas out into the street and has Phocas executed, and his body is mutilated before it is burned. The watching crowd cheers. Heraclius is crowned emperor that same afternoon, his hands still slick with Phocas's blood. He inherits a dying empire, and Khosrow, who never cared about avenging Maurice, refuses every offer of peace. The war will continue, and it will get worse. The new emperor stands alone on the ramparts of Constantinople, staring east across the dark waters of the Bosphorus. The year is 610. The empire he has just seized is rotting from within. And somewhere beyond that black water, in the palaces of Ctesiphon, the Persian king of kings is sharpening his sword. Emperor Heraclius has just murdered his way to the throne. His hands are still stained with the blood of Phocas, the tyrant he dragged through the streets and executed in front of a cheering mob. The people of Constantinople think they have been saved. They think the nightmare is over. They are wrong. The nightmare has only just begun. Heraclius has inherited a corpse. The Roman Empire in the year 610 is barely functioning. The imperial treasury is empty. Phocas spent 8 years hunting ghosts, executing senators he imagined were plotting against him, purging the army of competent officers, bleeding the state dry with paranoia and incompetence. The frontier legions, the professional soldiers who once held the line against Persia, are gone, dead, disbanded, or scattered. In their place are poorly trained peasant levies, farmers given rusty swords and told to hold back the greatest military machine in the world. It is not going to work. And Khosrow, the Persian king, will not talk. Heraclius sends embassy after embassy, offering peace, offering tribute, offering anything to stop the bleeding. Every offer is rejected. Some later sources claim Khosrow sent a brutal warning to Heraclius's envoys. The exact details are disputed. The message is clear. There will be no negotiation. There will be no compromise. Rome will be destroyed. Not defeated, not humbled, destroyed. Because Khosrow does not see himself as a king anymore. He sees himself as destiny. He is no longer avenging Maurice. That excuse died years ago. Now he believes he is restoring the empire of Cyrus and Darius, the ancient Persian kings who had once ruled from India to Greece. He will push Rome into the sea. He will stand in Constantinople and watch the Roman eagle burn. He believes this with the certainty of a prophet. And in the year 611, it looks like he might be right. The Roman defences in the east are collapsing. The great fortress cities of Mesopotamia, the shield wall that had protected Syria and Anatolia for centuries, are falling one by one. Dara, the fortress city built by Justinian himself a century earlier, falls after a months-long siege in 604. The walls, supposedly impregnable, are battered down by Persian siege engines. When the Persians finally storm through the breach, they massacre the garrison to the last man. The governor of the city is dragged before Khosrow in chains, paraded through the streets of Ctesiphon, and then executed as a warning. Dara is devastated, its defences demolished, much of the city reduced to rubble. Amida falls next, then Edessa, then Nisibis. Every city that resists is destroyed, every population that fights back is deported into slavery. The roads east are clogged with Roman prisoners, thousands upon thousands of them, chained together and marched toward Persia to be sold in the slave markets of Ctesiphon or worked to death in the mines and quarries of the interior. Families are torn apart. Children are separated from their mothers. Old men and women who cannot keep up with the forced marches are clubbed to death and left in ditches by the side of the road. Khosrow has unleashed 3 armies, 3 unstoppable juggernauts, each commanded by one of his most brilliant generals. In the north, General Shayin drives through Armenia and into Anatolia, burning Roman estates, carrying away livestock and treasure. His cavalry raids deep into Asia Minor, reaching within 200 miles of Constantinople itself. Villages are burned, monasteries are looted, captured Roman soldiers are displayed as warnings to anyone who might resist. In the centre, another Persian army secures the Euphrates Valley, cutting off any hope of reinforcement. Persian control of the river means Roman armies in Syria cannot retreat north, and Roman armies in Anatolia cannot march south to help. The empire is being cut in half, and in the south, the most feared general in the Persian Empire begins his march. His name is Sharbaraz, the boar of the empire. He is 60 years old, a veteran of 50 campaigns, a man who has never lost a major battle. He commands tens of thousands, the elite of the Persian army. Savaran cavalry in steel lamella armour, hard infantry from the highlands and veteran siege crews. This is the army that will break Rome. Sharbaraz crosses the Euphrates in the spring of 611 and marches into Syria. The province of Syria is the jewel of the Roman East. Its cities, Damascus and Antioch and Aleppo, are among the richest in the world. For 600 years they have been Roman. Now they will learn what it means to be conquered. Damascus is the first to fall. In 613, Sharbaraz lays siege to the city. The walls are strong, but the garrison is weak, and there is no relief force coming. The siege lasts 2 months. The Persians build siege towers, massive wooden structures on wheels, pushed up to the walls by teams of oxen. Catapults hurl stones day and night, pounding the battlements, killing defenders, shattering morale. Finally, in April, the walls are breached. The Persians pour into the city like a flood. What happens next becomes a template for every Persian conquest. The city is systematically looted. Persian soldiers go house to house, seizing gold, silver, silks, anything of value. The churches are stripped bare. Icons are smashed. Altars are desecrated. The population is rounded up in the central square. The young and healthy, those who can work or be sold as slaves, are chained together. The old, the sick, the very young, those with no value, are left behind to starve. Outside the city gates, those who resisted are executed as a warning. The bodies are displayed along the roads for miles. It is a message. This is what happens to those who resist Persia. And Sharbaraz is only getting started. By May of 613, his army reaches Antioch. Antioch is the third largest city in the Roman Empire, a metropolis of hundreds of thousands, a centre of learning and culture and trade. Its walls were built centuries ago and reinforced by generations of emperors. The city has warehouses full of grain, aqueducts bringing water from the mountains, a population wealthy enough to fund its own defence. Antioch believes it can hold. It is wrong. Heraclius, desperate to stop the bleeding, makes a decision that will haunt him for the rest of his life. He personally marches south from Constantinople with every soldier he can scrape together. It is not much. 20,000 men, maybe 30, a mixture of veterans from the capital garrison and raw recruits who have never seen combat. But it is all he has. If he does not stop Sharbaraz here, there will be nothing left between Persia and Constantinople. The two armies meet in the plains outside Antioch in mid-June. Heraclius tries to be clever. He deploys his infantry in the centre, a solid line of shields and spears, and places his cavalry on the wings, hoping to encircle the Persians. It is the same tactic that won battles for Rome centuries ago, when Roman discipline and training were unmatched. But this is not that Rome. These are not those soldiers, and Sharbaraz is not an amateur. The Persian general lets Heraclius deploy. He watches from a low hill surrounded by his officers, calm and patient. Then he gives the order. The Savaran, the Persian heavy cavalry, 10,000 horsemen in full armour, charge. They do not charge the Roman infantry. They charge the Roman cavalry, the weakest part of Heraclius's line. The impact is like a hammer on glass. The Roman horsemen, poorly trained and badly equipped, shatter on contact. Hundreds are killed in the first minutes. The rest break and run. With the Roman flanks collapsing, Sharbaraz orders a general assault. His heavy Savaran cavalry, thousands of armoured horsemen, charge the now exposed Roman infantry. The Roman centre, watching their own cavalry flee and seeing the Persians bearing down on them, breaks. Panic spreads. Soldiers throw down their weapons and flee. The line disintegrates. The Persians, sensing the rout, charge with full force. The battle becomes a massacre. Thousands of Romans are cut down as they run. Heraclius himself, surrounded by his bodyguard, is nearly captured. He has to fight his way out, swinging a sword, his armour dented and covered in blood. He escapes north with maybe a tenth of his army. The rest are dead or captured. Antioch falls 3 days later. With no army to defend it, the city opens its gates and begs for mercy. There is none. The Persians sack the city for a week. The population is enslaved. Leading clergy are executed in the streets. Churches are burned and looted. Centres of learning are destroyed. By the time the Persians are done, Antioch is a ghost town. Empty streets, burned out buildings, silence. The psychological blow to the Roman world is immense. If the emperor himself cannot stop the Persians, who can? Heraclius limps back to Constantinople, defeated and humiliated. There is open talk in the Senate of deposing him, of finding someone, anyone, who can save the empire. But there is no one, and the Persians are not done. In the spring of 614, Sharbaraz turns south. His target is the holiest city in Christendom, Jerusalem. For Christians, Jerusalem is not just a city. It is the centre of the world, the place where Christ walked, where he preached the Sermon on the Mount, where he was betrayed, tried, crucified, and rose from the dead. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, built by Constantine the Great 3 centuries earlier, stands over the site of Christ's tomb. Inside, in a gold reliquary, is the most sacred object in all of Christianity, the true cross. The wood upon which the Son of God died. To lose Jerusalem would be a spiritual apocalypse, a sign that God himself had turned his face away from Rome. Sharbaraz arrives at the walls of Jerusalem in April 614 with an army of 40,000 men. The Roman garrison numbers maybe 3,000. But the defenders are not just soldiers. Thousands of Christian monks armed with clubs and staffs have joined the defence. Militias of armed civilians patrol the walls. The Patriarch of Jerusalem, Zacharias, walks the ramparts with an icon of the Virgin Mary, blessing the defenders, promising them that God will protect the city. The people of Jerusalem believe him. They believe that the walls, blessed by God, cannot fall. They are wrong. The siege lasts 3 weeks. The Persians are masters of siege warfare. They bring up massive siege towers, rolling fortresses that allow attackers to fight at the same height as the defenders on the walls. They dig mines under the fortifications, tunnelling beneath the walls and propping them up with wooden beams, then setting the beams on fire to collapse the walls from below. They use catapults, flinging stones and pots of burning oil over the walls, setting fires in the city, spreading panic. Day and night, the bombardment continues. The defenders, exhausted and outnumbered, begin to crack. There are sources that claim the city's Jewish population, long oppressed by Byzantine Christian rulers, aided the Persians. Some accounts say that thousands of Jewish rebels from the surrounding countryside joined the siege, eager for revenge against the Christian establishment. Whether this is true or exaggerated by later Christian chroniclers is debated by historians. But what is certain is that in early May 614, accounts differ on the exact day, the walls are breached. Persian siege engines smash a section of the western wall to rubble. The defenders try to plug the gap, but there are too many Persians. The enemy pours through the breach like water through a broken dam. What happens next is one of the darkest chapters in the history of the ancient world. The city is given over to slaughter for 3 days. The killing is brutal. Persian soldiers and their allies go house to house, killing anyone they find. Monks are dragged from their monasteries and butchered. Priests are cut down at their altars. Women and children hide in churches, praying for deliverance, but there is no sanctuary. The doors are broken down, and the killing continues. Bodies pile up in the streets. The smell of death hangs over the city like a fog. Modern archaeology has confirmed the horror. In 1989, Israeli archaeologists excavated the Mamilla Cave in Jerusalem and found a mass burial site containing hundreds of remains showing signs of violent death. Ancient sources give wildly varying casualty estimates, ranging from 20,000 to 60,000 dead. The exact number will never be known, but the archaeological evidence confirms that a massacre of significant scale occurred. The patriarch Zacharias, who promised that God would save the city, is taken captive. He is chained and paraded through the ruins, a trophy, a symbol of Rome's helplessness. 35,000 survivors, those lucky or unlucky enough not to be killed, are rounded up and marched east to Persia to be sold as slaves. Entire families are torn apart. Mothers scream as their children are dragged away. Old men and women, too weak to march, are killed on the spot. But the worst blow is yet to come. Persian soldiers enter the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the holiest site in Christianity. They smash the altars, tear down the curtains, loot the gold and silver, and then they find it, the true cross. The relic is torn from its sanctuary, wrapped in cloth and carried out of the city. Shahrbaraz sends it to Ctesiphon as a gift for Khosrow. The King of Kings places it in his palace, a trophy, a humiliation, a sign that the Christian God has been defeated by the might of Persia. The news reaches Constantinople like a blow to the stomach. In the Hagia Sophia, the great cathedral of the capital, priests read the dispatches and weep openly. Congregations fall to their knees, praying, begging God to explain why he has abandoned his people. Apocalyptic preachers take to the streets, proclaiming that the end times have arrived, that the Antichrist walks the earth, that Jerusalem's fall is the prelude to the Last Judgment. Heraclius, listening to the reports, realizes that he is not just losing a war, he is losing the faith of his people, and faith is all he has left. The Persians do not stop. By 615 they control all of Syria and Palestine. Shahin's northern army has pushed deep into Anatolia, reaching Chalcedon, directly across the Bosphorus from Constantinople. From the walls of the capital, Roman citizens can see Persian campfires burning on the opposite shore. The enemy is at the gates, and then, in 619, comes the final disaster. Egypt falls. Egypt is the breadbasket of the Roman Empire. Its grain feeds Constantinople and the armies of the East. Its tax revenues, generated by the most productive farmland in the Mediterranean, fund the imperial government. Without Egypt, the empire cannot function. Everyone knows this. Heraclius knows it. Khosrow knows it. And Shahrbaraz, ordered to take Egypt, knows exactly what it means. This will be the killing blow. The Persian general invades from Palestine, marching his army down the coastal road. The great city of Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great 1,000 years earlier, is the capital of Roman Egypt. It is one of the wonders of the ancient world. Its lighthouse, the Pharos, is one of the 7 wonders. It is a major centre of learning and trade. Its population is in the hundreds of thousands. Its walls are massive. Alexandria believes it can hold. The siege lasts for a year. The Persians surround the city, cutting off supply routes, starving the population. Inside, food runs out. Bread prices skyrocket. People begin to eat rats, dogs, leather. The defenders, weakened by hunger, can barely man the walls. Still, Alexandria holds. But in June 619, the city is betrayed. A Roman official named Peter, for reasons lost to history, opens one of the city gates in the middle of the night. Persian soldiers pour in. By the time the garrison realizes what has happened, it is too late. The Chalcedonian patriarch, John the Almsgiver, flees the city on a ship bound for Cyprus. The rest of the population is not so lucky. The Persians sack Alexandria. The monastic centre at Enaton, 9 miles west of the city, is burned to the ground. Monks are killed, libraries are looted. By 621, all of Egypt is in Persian hands. Heraclius stands on the edge of an abyss. He has lost 3/4 of the empire's territory. Syria, Palestine, Egypt, all gone. 3/4 of the empire's tax revenue gone. The capital is beginning to starve. Without Egyptian grain, there is not enough food to feed Constantinople's population. Bread riots break out in the streets. Heraclius' own soldiers, unpaid for months, threaten to mutiny. There is serious discussion in the Imperial Council of abandoning Constantinople altogether, of fleeing west to Carthage, in North Africa, and ruling a rump empire from there. Some of Heraclius' advisors beg him to do it, to save what can be saved, to let the East go. Constantinople can be rebuilt later, they say. But if you stay, if you are captured or killed, the empire dies with you. Heraclius refuses. He will not be the emperor who abandoned Rome. But he is running out of options. The empire is bankrupt. He begins stripping the churches of gold and silver, melting down chalices and candelabras to mint coins. The patriarch Sergius, the most powerful churchman in the empire, supports him. Take what you need, Sergius says. God will forgive us if we use his gold to save his empire. Heraclius takes everything. Icons, reliquaries, altar, vessels. All of it melted down and turned into soldiers' pay. He uses the money to hire mercenaries and retrain the army. He knows he cannot win a war of attrition. Persia is too big, too wealthy, too strong. His only hope is to do something insane, something Khosrow will never expect. But before he can act, the nightmare gets worse. In the summer of 626, Rome faces total annihilation. Khosrow, sensing that Constantinople is on the verge of collapse, hatches a plan. For years, he has been in secret communication with the Avar Khaganate, the nomadic empire that controls the Balkans and the lands north of the Danube. The Avars are brutal, efficient, and they hate Rome. They have been raiding Roman territory for decades, extorting tribute, burning villages, taking slaves. Now Khosrow offers them a deal. If the Avars will attack Constantinople from the west, while the Persians attack from the east, they will split the plunder. Half the wealth of the Roman capital for the Avars, half for Persia. And when the city falls, they will burn it to the ground. The Avar Khagan agrees. He calls up every warrior in his empire, Avars, Slavs, Bulgars, 80,000 men, the largest army the Avars have ever assembled. They march south, dragging siege engines with them, catapults and towers built specifically to assault the walls of Constantinople. The horde moves like a plague, burning everything in its path. By late June 626, they reach the walls of the city. Constantinople is the greatest fortress in the world. Its triple walls, built by Emperor Theodosius II 2 centuries earlier, have never been breached. The outer wall rises high above a wide moat. Behind it stands a second wall, even taller, and behind that looms the massive inner wall, thick and studded with towers bristling with catapults and ballistae. Any army that tries to assault these walls will be slaughtered, but the Avars are not any army, and they have brought the tools to break Constantinople. Heraclius is not. Even in the city, he's away in Armenia campaigning against the Persians, trying to strike at the heart of their empire. The defence of Constantinople falls to the patriarch Sergius and the patrician Bonus, while Heraclius's young son Constantine, still a boy of about 14, serves as co-emperor. The population is terrified. They can see the Avar camp from the walls, a city of tents stretching for miles, cooking fires burning at night like stars. The Avars begin building siege towers, massive wooden structures 4 stories tall, covered in wet hides to protect them from fire. Day and night, Avar work crews fill in the defensive moat with earth and rubble, building ramps for the towers to roll forward. On June 29th, the first assault begins. The Avars push their siege towers up to the outer wall. Archers on top of the towers rain arrows down on the Roman defenders. But the Romans fight back with desperate courage. They pour boiling oil from the walls, burning the Avars below. They use flaming arrows to set fire to the siege towers. Clay pots filled with burning pitch and resin are hurled at the attackers, setting them ablaze. One by one, the Avar siege towers catch fire and collapse. The assault fails, but the Avars do not give up. For weeks they attack again and again. The walls are pounded by catapults. Stones the size of a man's head smash into the battlements, killing defenders, shattering merlons. The defenders work through the night, repairing breaches, dragging corpses off the walls, praying for deliverance. Inside the city, the population huddles in churches, listening to the sounds of battle, wondering if this is the end. The Persians, meanwhile, are camped at Chalcedon on the eastern shore of the Bosphorus. The plan is for them to cross the straits and attack the sea walls, while the Avars attack the land walls. Caught between two armies, Constantinople will fall. But there is a problem. The Byzantine navy controls the Bosphorus. The Roman warships, fast dromons with bronze rams, patrol the straits day and night. Any Persian attempt to cross will be slaughtered. Shahrbaraz hesitates. He can see Constantinople from his camp, so close, but the water is too dangerous. The Avars try to solve the problem themselves. They order their Slavic allies to build a fleet. The slaves, who live along rivers, are skilled at making monoxyla, simple canoes carved from tree trunks. They build hundreds of them, crude boats that can hold 10 or 20 men each. The plan is for the Slavs to cross the Golden Horn, the narrow inlet on the northern side of the city, and land troops on the undefended shore. If they can get enough men across, they can open the gates from the inside. On August 7th, 626, the decisive moment arrives. At dawn, the Avar fleet of monoxyla sets out across the Golden Horn. At the same time, the Avars launch their largest assault yet on the land walls. This is it, the final push. If the city falls today, the Roman Empire ends. The Byzantine navy, commanded by the patrician Bonus, is waiting. The Roman dromons, sleek warships with reinforced bronze rams and crews of experienced sailors, sail out to meet the Avar fleet. What happens next is a slaughter. The heavy Roman ships smash into the fragile monoxyla, capsizing them by the dozen. Slavic warriors, weighed down by armour and weapons, drown in the cold waters of the Golden Horn. The Romans methodically ram boat after boat, crushing them like matchsticks. Hundreds of bodies float in the harbour, face down, arms outstretched, bobbing in the waves. The Avar naval assault is annihilated. On the land walls, the Avar attack without naval support falters. The defenders, seeing the destruction of the enemy fleet, are filled with renewed hope. They fight with manic energy, hurling everything they have at the attackers. Stones, arrows, boiling oil, flaming pitch. The walls become a furnace. The Avars, suffering horrific casualties, pull back. The siege towers are burned. The assault fails. The Avar Khagan is furious. He blames Shahrbaraz for failing to cross the Bosphorus and attack from the east. Shahrbaraz blames the Avars for their incompetence. The alliance collapses in mutual rage and recrimination. On August 8th, the Khagan orders a retreat. The Avar army packs up and marches north, dragging their wounded and their broken siege engines behind them. Shahrbaraz, isolated and unable to take the city alone, withdraws back to Chalcedon. Constantinople has been saved. Barely. The population pours into the streets, weeping with relief. The Patriarch Sergius leads a procession through the city, carrying the icon of the Virgin Mary, singing hymns of thanks. The people believe it was a miracle, that the Mother of God herself defended the walls. And maybe they are right. Or maybe it was Bonus's navy and the courage of exhausted defenders who refused to quit. Either way, the city stands. But Heraclius, when he hears the news in far-off Armenia, knows the truth. He cannot keep defending forever. Sooner or later the Persians will come again, and next time the walls might not hold. He has to do something desperate, something insane. He has to stop playing defense and take the fight to the enemy. He has to invade Persia itself, and if he fails, Rome dies. Now rewind to the winter of 621. The emperor sits alone in his private quarters in the great palace of Constantinople. It is the winter of 621. Outside, in the streets of the capital, people are starving. The grain ships from Egypt no longer come. The granaries are empty. There are riots. There is talk of desertion. There is talk of surrender. Heraclius listens to the reports from his advisors and makes a decision that will either save the empire or destroy it. He will not defend. He will attack. It is madness. Every rational voice in the imperial council tells him so. The empire has lost 3/4 of its territory. The army is a shadow of what it once was. The treasury is bankrupt. Persia controls everything from the Euphrates to the Nile, an empire stretching from India to Egypt, and Heraclius wants to invade it. His advisors beg him to reconsider, stay in Constantinople, defend what remains, negotiate, anything but this suicide mission. But Heraclius understands something his advisors do not. You cannot win a defensive war against Persia. Khosrow has unlimited resources, unlimited manpower, unlimited time. He can send army after army, lose battle after battle, and still grind Rome into dust through sheer attrition. The only way to stop him is to threaten something he cannot afford to lose: his own throne, his own capital, his own empire. Heraclius begins preparing for a campaign unlike any Rome has attempted in 2 decades. He knows the army he has is not good enough. The soldiers who fled from Antioch, who cowered behind the walls during the siege of Constantinople, they are not warriors, they are victims. He needs to rebuild them from the ground up. And so he does. For an entire year, from 621 to 622, Heraclius becomes a drill instructor. He moves the army to camps in Anatolia, away from the distractions and despair of the capital. Every day, dawn to dusk, the soldiers train, marching, fighting, cavalry drills, archery practice, mock battles. Heraclius himself leads the exercises, riding at the head of his troops, fighting in practice duels, showing them that their emperor is not some distant figure in a palace, but a soldier like them. He eats the same food, sleeps in the same tents, shares their hardships. He changes the army structure. The old Roman legions, the heavy infantry formations that conquered the Mediterranean world under Caesar and Trajan, are gone. They are too slow, too rigid, too vulnerable to Persian cavalry. Heraclius builds a new kind of army, lighter and faster, built around mounted troops. He reorganizes elite cavalry units, household troops trained to charge and wheel and fight from horseback. He recruits Armenian horse archers, men who can ride and shoot at the same time like the Persians. He drills his men in feigned retreats, the tactic that had destroyed Roman armies at Antioch. Now his soldiers will use it against the Persians, and he rebrands the war. This is no longer a political conflict over provinces and borders. This is a holy war, a crusade. The Persians stole the true cross from Jerusalem. They desecrated the tomb of Christ. They murdered priests and monks. This is not just Rome fighting Persia. This is Christianity fighting for its survival. Heraclius commissions battle standards with the face of Christ embroidered in gold thread. He orders priests to accompany the army, blessing the troops before every march, holding services before every battle. The soldiers are told they are God's chosen instruments, that if they die in battle they will go straight to heaven. They believe it, or at least enough of them do. In early April 622, Heraclius is ready. He leads his army out of Constantinople in a grand procession. The entire city turns out to watch. The patriarch Sergius, the most powerful man in the empire after the emperor, stands at the gates of the city and hands Heraclius an icon of the Virgin Mary. "The Mother of God will protect you," Sergius says. "Go and bring back the cross." Heraclius takes the icon and mounts his horse. Behind him, 20,000 men, the entire mobile field army of the Eastern Roman Empire, march out through the Golden Gate. If this army is destroyed, there is no other. This is the last roll of the dice. Heraclius does not march directly toward Persia. Instead, he sails his army across the Bosphorus to PYRE in Bithynia, then marches east into the Anatolian interior. He spends the summer of 622 training his men further, conducting maneuvers, scouting the terrain. He is in no hurry. He knows the Persians are expecting him to do something predictable, to march south towards Syria and try to retake Antioch. He will not give them what they expect. In the autumn of 622, Heraclius marches northeast toward Cappadocia, the volcanic highlands of central Anatolia. His target is not a city, it is a strategic position. If he can threaten the Persian supply lines running from the Euphrates Valley to the Persian-occupied territories, in Anatolia he can force the enemy to react. He can force Shahrbaraz, the boar, the general who has never been beaten, to come to him, and Shahrbaraz takes the bait. The Persian general, who has been campaigning in western Anatolia, receives reports that Heraclius is moving east. If Heraclius reaches the Euphrates, he can cut off Shahrbaraz's army from reinforcements and supplies. Shahrbaraz has no choice. He pulls his forces back from the frontier and marches south to intercept the Romans. The two armies meet somewhere in the mountains of Cappadocia. The exact location is lost to history. But what happens there changes everything. Shahrbaraz, confident after years of victories, sets a trap. He hides part of his army in a valley concealed by trees and hills and places the rest of his forces in plain sight. The plan is simple: lure the Romans forward, then spring the ambush and surround them. It is the same tactic he used at Antioch. It worked perfectly then. It should work now, but Heraclius is not the same man who fled from Antioch. He has learned. Roman scouts, ranging ahead of the main army, discover the hidden Persian forces. They ride back and report to Heraclius. The emperor now knows Shahrbaraz's plan, and he decides to turn the trap back on the Persians. Heraclius orders his army to advance as if they suspect nothing. The Romans march toward the visible Persian forces, spreading out into battle formation. Shahrbaraz, watching from a distance, sees the Romans coming and signals his hidden troops to prepare. This is the moment. When the Romans are fully committed, the ambush will be sprung and they will be slaughtered. But then Heraclius gives a sudden order: retreat. The Romans turn and run, as if in panic. The Persian soldiers in the main force, seeing the Romans flee, break formation and give chase. They pour out of their defensive positions, eager to pursue what they think is a beaten enemy. Shahrbaraz tries to hold them back, but the bloodlust is too strong. Thousands of Persians surge forward, chasing the fleeing Romans, and then Heraclius springs his trap. The retreat was a feint. At a signal from the emperor, the Roman cavalry, his elite household troops, wheel around and charge. The Persians, spread out and disorganized from the pursuit, are caught completely off guard. The Roman horsemen smash into them like a tidal wave. The impact is devastating. Persians are trampled, speared, cut down by the hundreds. Panic spreads. The Persian line collapses. The hidden Persian forces meant to be the anvil of the ambush now have no hammer. They emerge from their concealment, but the battle is already lost. The Romans, emboldened by their sudden reversal of fortune, charge again. The fighting is brutal and chaotic, but the Persians are broken. Shahrbaraz himself, seeing his army disintegrating, flees the field with his bodyguard. It is the first time in his entire career that he has lost a major battle. The victory at Cappadocia is more than a tactical success. It is a psychological earthquake. For 20 years, the Romans have been losing. For 20 years, every battle has been a disaster, every campaign a retreat. Now, for the first time, a Roman army has met the Persians in open combat and won. The soldiers, who marched out of Constantinople as traumatized survivors, now march as conquerors, and Heraclius, who was mocked as the emperor who abandoned his empire, is now hailed as a military genius. But Heraclius does not press his advantage. Winter is coming, and campaigning in the mountains is suicide. He withdraws to friendly territory, gives his men time to rest, and prepares for the next phase. Back in Ctesiphon, Khosrow receives the news of the defeat with fury. He sends a letter to Shahrbaraz, accusing him of cowardice, threatening him with execution. The letter is intercepted by Roman spies and delivered to Heraclius. The emperor, recognizing an opportunity, keeps the letter. He will use it later. In the spring of 624, Heraclius launches his second campaign. This time he marches deep into Armenia, the mountainous kingdom that straddles the border between Rome and Persia. Armenia is a fractured land, divided between feuding noble families, occupied by Persian garrisons, but culturally and religiously closer to Rome. Most Armenians are Christians. Most hate their Persian overlords. Heraclius offers them liberation. He sweeps through Armenia like a liberating hero. City after city opens its gates to him. Armenian nobles, seeing that Rome might actually win this war, switch sides and bring their retinues of cavalry. Heraclius's army swells. By the summer of 624, he has 40,000 men, the largest Roman field army in a generation. And then he does something that shocks the Persian world. He marches into Azerbaijan, the heartland of Persian power in the Caucasus, and captures the city of Ganzak. Ganzak is not just any city. It is a major administrative centre, a treasury city where the Persians store wealth collected from the Caucasus provinces. Heraclius's soldiers loot the treasury, carrying away cartloads of gold and silver. The emperor uses the plunder to pay his troops and win more allies. But the wealth is not the point. The point is the message. Rome can strike anywhere. Even the heart of Persia is not safe. Then Heraclius marches to the fire temple of Adur-Gushnasp. Adur-Gushnasp is one of the 3 holiest sites in Zoroastrianism, the Persian religion. The temple, located in the mountains of Azerbaijan, houses a sacred fire that has been burning continuously for centuries. It is the religious heart of Persian kingship. Every Persian king, upon his coronation, makes a pilgrimage to Adur-Gushnasp to be blessed by the priests. The fire is said to protect the empire, to grant divine favour to the king of kings. It is untouchable, sacrosanct. Heraclius burns it to the ground. Roman soldiers storm the temple complex in late 624. The priests are killed, and the treasures of the temple, gold and silver offerings accumulated over centuries, are looted. The sacred fire, which had burned for generations of Persian kings, is removed and the sanctuary desecrated. The temple buildings are damaged and defiled. The act is deliberate, calculated. Heraclius is sending a message to Khosrow. You desecrated Jerusalem. You stole the true cross. Now I have desecrated your holy site. We are even, except we are not even, because I am in your territory, and you cannot stop me. The psychological impact on Persia is immense. The Persian nobility is horrified. How could the king of kings allow this to happen? How could the sacred fire, protected by God, be extinguished by infidels? Zoroastrian priests proclaim it an apocalyptic sign, evidence that the end times are near. Khosrow, desperate to restore his prestige, sends army after army to destroy Heraclius. But the emperor is always one step ahead, moving through the mountains of Armenia and Azerbaijan like a ghost, striking and then vanishing before the Persians can corner him. For 3 years, from 624 to 627, Heraclius campaigns in the east without returning to Constantinople. He lives in the saddle, leading his army from battle to battle, raid to raid. His soldiers begin calling him the new Alexander, comparing him to Alexander the Great, who had conquered Persia 1,000 years earlier. Heraclius does not discourage the comparison. He cultivates it. He wears a cloak like Alexander. He leads cavalry charges personally, like Alexander. He portrays himself as the inheritor of Alexander's legacy, the man destined to humble Persia and restore the glory of Rome. But Khosrow, desperate and humiliated, makes one last attempt to turn the war around. In 626, he orders Shahabaraz to take a massive army and march on Constantinople. If Heraclius wants to rampage through Persia, fine. Persia will take the Roman capital. The siege of 626, which we have already witnessed, is Khosrow's attempt to force Heraclius to abandon his invasion and rush home. It fails. Constantinople holds, and Heraclius, gambling that the walls will protect his city, stays in the east. With the failure of the siege, Khosrow has run out of options. He has no more armies to spare. Most of his best generals are dead or discredited. His empire is beginning to fracture. Provincial governors, seeing the chaos, are starting to act independently. The Persian nobility is whispering about a coup. Khosrow needs a miracle. He does not get one. In the autumn of 627, Heraclius makes an alliance that will decide the war. He travels north to the frontier of the Caucasus to meet the ruler of the Western Gokturk Khaganate, a vast nomadic empire that controls the steppes from Central Asia to the Black Sea. The Gokturks are traditional enemies of Persia. For decades they have fought border wars with the Sasanians. Now Heraclius offers them an opportunity for plunder and revenge. The meeting takes place under the walls of Tiflis, the capital of Caucasian Iberia. The Gokturk ruler Tongyabgu Kagan, known to the Byzantines as Zebel, rides out with his retinue to meet the Roman emperor. The Kagan is impressed by Heraclius. Here is a man who has marched thousands of miles into enemy territory, who has burned Persia's holiest temple, who has defeated every army sent against him. Tongyabgu rides up to Heraclius, dismounts and bows. Then he kisses the emperor's shoulder, a gesture of respect among the steppe peoples. Heraclius, in return, embraces the Khagan. He calls him son. He places his own imperial diadem on Tongyabgu's head, a symbolic gesture of alliance and shared purpose. Then he makes an offer. Join me in a final invasion of Persia. Help me destroy Khosrow. In return, you will have half the plunder. Gold, slaves, land, whatever we capture, we will share. And to seal the alliance, I will give you my daughter, the Princess Eudoxia Epiphania, in marriage. The Khagan accepts. He provides. Heraclius, with 40,000 Turkic horsemen, fierce steppe warriors whose reputation alone strikes terror into Persian hearts. The combined Roman-Turkic army is now the largest force Heraclius has ever commanded. 80,000 men, cavalry, infantry, siege engines. It is an army that can take on the full might of Persia, and it is marching south. The target is Ctesiphon, the Persian capital. In mid-September 627, Heraclius and his Gokturk allies march out of Armenia and descend into Mesopotamia. This is the heartland of the Persian Empire, the fertile valley between the Tigris and Euphrates, where civilization itself was born. Persian cities dot the landscape. Persian fortresses guard the roads. This is enemy territory in the deepest sense. If Heraclius is defeated here, there is no retreat. His army will be annihilated. But if he can threaten Ctesiphon, he can force Khosrow to surrender. Khosrow is in full panic. He has no more armies. Most of his generals are dead, disgraced, or refusing to fight. He scrapes together one last force, pulling soldiers from garrisons, levying peasants, calling up the reserves. Command is given to a Persian commander named Rahzad, known in Byzantine sources as Rhazates, but he is loyal and he is desperate. He knows that if he fails, the empire falls. Rhazates gathers every available soldier and marches north to intercept Heraclius before he can reach Ctesiphon. The two armies meet near the ruins of the ancient Assyrian capital of Nineveh, on the west bank of the great Zab River. It is December the 12th, 627. The weather is cold and miserable. A fog hangs over the river valley, thick and grey, limiting visibility. Both armies are exhausted, but both know that this is the end. Whoever wins this battle wins the war. The Battle of Nineveh is the climax of 26 years of conflict. Everything that has happened since the murder of Maurice, every siege, every massacre, every burned city has led to this moment. Two armies, Roman and Persian, face each other across a frozen plain, and both know that only one will leave. Rhazates deploys his forces in three massive formations. The centre is heavy infantry, Dalamite axemen and Persian spearmen, the core of his army. On the flanks are cavalry, Savaran lancers and horse archers, meant to encircle and crush the Romans. It is a sound plan, the same formation that has won battles for Persia for centuries, but Rhazates is not Shahrbaraz. He does not have the experience, the instinct, the genius, and he is facing Heraclius. The emperor deploys his own forces carefully. He places his infantry in the centre, a solid line to hold against the Persian charge. On the flanks are his cavalry, Roman and Armenian horsemen, supported by the Gokturk warriors, and he has a plan. He will use the same tactic that won at Cappadocia, the feigned retreat. The battle begins at dawn. The Persians attack first, their three formations advancing across the plain. The fog is so thick that soldiers can barely see 50 yards ahead. The Persians, expecting a defensive line, march forward confidently, and then suddenly the Romans charge. Heraclius, at the head of his cavalry, leads a thundering assault directly into the Persian left flank. The shock is devastating. Persian horsemen, caught unprepared, are trampled and speared. The flank begins to collapse. Rhazates, seeing his left wing crumbling, orders his centre to advance faster, trying to overwhelm the Roman infantry before Heraclius can wheel around and attack the rear. The Persian infantry crashes into the Roman line. The fighting is savage. Shields splinter, swords break, men scream and die in the fog. For hours the two sides grind against each other, neither giving ground. Then Heraclius springs the trap. He pulls his cavalry back as if retreating, and the Persians, thinking they are winning, surge forward to pursue, but the retreat is a feint. The Romans wheel around and charge again, this time into the exposed flank of the pursuing Persians. The impact breaks the Persian formation. Panic spreads. According to the Byzantine chronicler Nikephoros, something extraordinary happens at this moment. Razats, seeing the battle turning against him, rides out into the open ground between the two armies and challenges Heraclius to single combat. It is a desperate gambit, a last attempt to turn the tide through personal valour. If the Roman emperor can be killed, the Roman army will collapse. Heraclius accepts. The two commanders ride toward each other. Thousands of soldiers, Roman and Persian, stop fighting to watch. Razates draws his sword. Heraclius, mounted on his warhorse, charges. The Persian general swings his blade, aiming for Heraclius's head, but the emperor is faster. He ducks under the blow, drives his horse forward, and thrusts his sword upward. The blade catches Razates in the throat. The Persian general falls from his horse, dead before he hits the ground. The Persian army, seeing their commander killed, breaks. Panic turns to rout. Soldiers throw down their weapons and run. The Romans pursue, cutting down thousands in the chaos. By the time the sun sets, 6,000 Persians are dead. The rest have scattered into the hills. The Battle of Nineveh is over. Rome has won. Whether the single combat actually happened is debated by historians. Byzantine chroniclers loved stories of heroic emperors fighting duels. But what is certain is that Razats died at Nineveh, and the Persian army was annihilated. And the road to Ctesiphon is now open. Heraclius does not march on the capital immediately. He knows that Ctesiphon is heavily fortified, and a siege would take months. He does not need to capture the city. He only needs to terrify it. So instead, he marches south to Dastagerd, Khosrow's personal palace complex 20 miles north of Ctesiphon. Dastagerd is one of the wonders of the Persian world. It is not just a palace. It is a city unto itself, a vast complex of gardens and fountains and treasure halls. Khosrow built it as a monument to his own greatness, filling it with the spoils of his conquests. There are gardens with exotic trees from India. There are fountains that flow with wine. There are menageries with lions and elephants and peacocks. And most importantly, there are treasure vaults filled with gold and jewels and silks, the accumulated wealth of the Sassanid Empire. In early January 628, Heraclius arrives at Dastagerd. Khosrow has already fled, abandoning his palace and racing south to Ctesiphon. The Roman soldiers enter the complex unopposed. What they find is beyond imagination. The treasure vaults are opened. Inside are mountains of gold coins, Persian darics and Roman solidi, looted from the treasuries of Damascus and Jerusalem and Antioch. There are chests of jewels, rubies and emeralds and sapphires. There are bolts of silk from China, worth their weight in gold. There are statues of solid silver, Persian kings and gods captured from temples, and most shockingly, there are hundreds of Roman military standards captured in battles over the centuries and kept as trophies. The lost eagles of Rome, thought gone forever, are here, rusting in Khosrow's trophy room. The Romans loot everything. Heraclius allows his soldiers to take what they can carry. Payment for 6 years of brutal campaigning. Wagons are loaded with treasure and sent west. The palace itself is stripped bare, and then, on Heraclius's orders, it is burned. The gardens are torched. The fountains are smashed. The menagerie animals are slaughtered or released. Dastagerd, Khosrow's monument to his own invincibility, is reduced to ruins. The emperor sends a message to Ctesiphon. He does not need to besiege the city. He does not need to kill Khosrow. The message is simple. Look at what I have done. I have destroyed your armies. I have burned your temples. I have looted your palace. You have lost. Surrender now, or I will march on Ctesiphon, and burn it too. Khosrow receives the message in his throne room. The King of Kings, who once dreamed of ruling the world, is a broken man. His empire is in ruins. His generals are dead. His treasure is gone. His own nobility is whispering about deposing him, and outside the city walls a Roman army waits. But Khosrow does not surrender. His pride will not allow it. He sends back a defiant message. I will never negotiate with the Roman dogs. I am the king of kings. I answer to no one. It is his last mistake, because his own son has had enough. On February 25th, 628, Prince Khosrow II, Khosrow's eldest son, leads a coup. He storms the royal palace with a group of loyal officers and arrests his father. The guards, tired of Khosrow's madness, do not resist. Khosrow is dragged from his throne, stripped of his royal regalia, and thrown into a dungeon. The King of Kings, who once commanded the greatest empire in the world, is now a prisoner. Khosrow offers his father a choice: abdicate, peacefully, and you will be allowed to live in exile. Refuse, and you will be executed. Khosrow refuses. He screams at his son, calling him a traitor, a coward, a disgrace to the throne. Khosrow, unmoved, condemns his father to death. The execution is brutal. Khosrow is brought out of the dungeon on February 28, 628, and forced to watch as his youngest son Madansha is murdered in front of him. Then it is Khosrow's turn. The man chosen to carry out the execution is a Persian nobleman named Mir Hormozd, whose father had been tortured and killed by Khosrow years earlier. Mir Hormozd has been waiting for this moment his entire life. He takes his time. Khosrow is executed by arrow fire, the king of kings, and buried in an unmarked grave. His body is buried in an unmarked grave. No monument, no funeral, no honours. The man who wanted to be the new Darius, the man who came closer than anyone in history to destroying Rome, dies like a criminal, and the war is over. Speaking of empires under siege, let's talk about protecting your digital empire. In the 7th century, Heraclius had to defend Constantinople's walls from invaders. Today, your personal data faces constant threats from hackers, trackers, and surveillance. That's where NordVPN comes in. NordVPN gives you control over your online security. With military-grade encryption, NordVPN protects your internet traffic from prying eyes. Whether you're on public Wi-Fi or browsing at home, your data stays secure behind an impenetrable digital wall. Plus, NordVPN lets you access content from over 60 countries. Want to watch shows that aren't available in your region? NordVPN has you covered, and with their threat protection feature, you're protected from malware, trackers, and intrusive ads. Right now, NordVPN is offering an exclusive deal for Wars in History viewers. Go to the link in description to get a huge discount on a 2-year plan plus 4 extra months for free. It's risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. Don't let your personal data fall like Jerusalem fell to the Persians. Protect yourself with NordVPN. Link in the description. Now back to the war that ended the ancient world. Khosrow II is crowned King of Kings on March 6th, 628, in the throne room of Ctesiphon. His father's blood has not yet dried on the dungeon floor. The Persian nobility, those who supported the coup, those who stood silent while Khosrow was murdered, gather to swear loyalty to the new monarch. Kavod, now Kavod II, stands before them and makes a promise. The war is over. There will be peace. The madness ends today. His first act as king is to send envoys to Heraclius. The message is simple. I am not my father. I did not start this war. Let us end it. Name your terms. Heraclius, camped near the ruins of Dastagerd, receives the Persian embassy in his tent. The envoys prostrate themselves before him, a gesture of submission that no Persian diplomat has made to a Roman emperor in centuries. They beg for peace. They offer anything, everything, to stop the Roman advance. Heraclius listens in silence. Then he dictates his terms. Persia will return every inch of territory conquered since 602. Syria, Palestine, Egypt, Armenia, Mesopotamia, all of it. Every Roman city, every fortress, every village, back under Roman control. Persia will release every Roman prisoner, from the highest-ranking general to the lowest slave, and allow them to return home. Persia will pay a financial indemnity, gold to compensate Rome for 26 years of war, and most importantly, Persia will return the true cross and every other relic stolen from Jerusalem. The Persian envoys, expecting harsh terms, are stunned. These are not the demands of a conqueror. These are the terms of a restoration, a return to the world as it was before Phocas murdered Maurice. Heraclius could demand more. He could demand Persian territory. He could demand the heads of Persian generals. He could demand that Persia become a Roman vassal. But he does not, because Heraclius understands something that Khosrow never did. Both empires are dying. If he pushes too hard, Persia will collapse completely and the chaos will spread. Better to restore the balance. Better to rebuild. Better to end the war before it ends both of them. Kavad accepts the terms immediately. By the spring of 628, a peace agreement is reached. After 26 years, the war is over. Heraclius calls Kavad his son in the official correspondence, an echo of the relationship between Maurice and the elder Khosrow, the relationship that started this entire nightmare. It is a symbolic gesture, an attempt to rebuild the old alliance, the old balance between Rome and Persia that had kept the ancient world stable for centuries. Persian troops begin withdrawing from occupied territories. Slowly, province by province, they march east, abandoning cities they have held for decades. In Damascus, in Antioch, in Alexandria, the Roman governors return. The population, those who survived the wars and the famines and the plagues, cautiously emerge from hiding. But these are not the same cities Heraclius remembers. They are ruins, burned out, shells, ghost towns. The great metropolises of the East, which once teemed with hundreds of thousands, are now home to far fewer survivors scavenging among the rubble. The true cross is returned in stages. Persian officials, supervised by Roman guards, transport the relic from Ctesiphon to the frontier. The handover is ceremonial, solemn. The cross is placed in a gold reliquary and entrusted to Heraclius's representatives. The emperor himself is not present. He is on his way back to Constantinople riding at the head of his army, returning home after 6 years of campaigning. But the cross will follow, and when it arrives, there will be a celebration unlike anything the empire has seen in a generation. Heraclius enters Constantinople in triumph in the autumn of 628. The entire city pours into the streets to watch the emperor's return. He rides through the Golden Gate, the ceremonial entrance reserved for victorious emperors, seated on a white horse, wearing his armour, his sword at his side. Behind him march his soldiers, veterans of 6 years of brutal campaigning, men who have marched across mountains and deserts, who have fought Persians and Turks and survived. The crowd throws flowers, they scream his name, they weep with relief. The patriarch Sergius meets the emperor at the gates of the Hagia Sophia, the great cathedral of Constantinople. The two men embrace. "You saved the empire," Sergius says. "God has delivered us." Heraclius, exhausted and aged beyond his years, says nothing. He walks into the cathedral and the doors close behind him. Inside, in the quiet, he kneels before the altar and prays. He thanks God for victory. He thanks God for survival. And he prays that the nightmare is truly over. But across the border, in Persia, the nightmare is just beginning. Kavad II, the young king who promised peace, rules for less than 6 months. In September 628, he falls ill. The symptoms are horrific. Fever, boils, vomiting, delirium. It is plague. The same. Disease that has been ravaging the Mediterranean world for decades. Kavad dies on September 6th, 628, screaming in agony. He's 25 years old. He leaves behind an 8-year-old son, Ardashir III, who is crowned King of Kings in a hasty ceremony. But an 8-year-old boy cannot rule an empire. The real power falls to the Persian nobility, and the nobility is fractured. For 4 centuries, the Sassanid Empire has been held together by the authority of the King of Kings, the absolute monarch who commanded the loyalty of all. With that authority gone, with a child on the throne, the empire begins to tear itself apart. There are 3 major factions: the Parsig faction, the Persian nobles who trace their lineage to the old Persian heartland, led by a nobleman named Khosrow; the Pahlav faction, the Parthian nobles from the north, led by Farrukh Hormizd of the powerful Isbabudan family, and the Nimruzi faction, the nobles from the eastern provinces led by the general Sharbaraz. All three factions want control of the empire, and none of them are willing to share. Ardashir III, the boy king, is controlled by his minister Mahadur Gushnasp. But Mahadur is a weak man, incapable of holding the factions together. In 630, General Sharbaraz, the Boar, the man who conquered Jerusalem and Egypt, decides he's had enough. He marches on Ctesiphon with 6,000 loyal soldiers. The city is besieged. Mahadur tries to rally the garrison, but he has no support. Sharbaraz makes deals with the other factions, promising them power and wealth in exchange for their support. Piruz Khosrow and Namdar Gushnasp, the leader of the Nimruzi, agree. Together they storm Ctesiphon. Ardashir III, the 10-year-old boy, is dragged from the palace and executed. His throat is cut in front of the assembled nobles. Ma'ada and dozens of other officials are killed alongside him. Sharbaraz proclaims himself king of kings. He has won, or so he thinks. 40 days later, Sharbaraz is murdered. Farrukh Hormizd, the leader of the Pahlav faction, who had been excluded from power, leads a coup. Sharbaraz is stabbed to death by his own guards, men bribed by Farrukh. The general who conquered half the Roman Empire dies in a palace hallway, bleeding out on marble floors, killed not by Romans but by fellow Persians. Farrukh places Boran, the daughter of Khosrow II, on the throne. She is the first woman to rule Persia in centuries. Farrukh believes he can control her, use her as a puppet while he runs the empire. But Boran is smarter than he realizes. She appoints him as her minister, gives him honors and titles, and quietly begins building her own power base. For a brief moment it looks like the chaos might end. It does not. Within months, Boran is deposed by Shapuri Sharbaraz, the son of Sharbaraz, and a member of the royal family. Shapur claims the throne by right of blood. But the Parsig faction refuses to recognize him. They stage their own coup, kill Shapur, and crown Azamidokt, Boran's sister, as the new monarch. Azamidokt rules for a few months. Farrukh Hormizd, still trying to control the throne, proposes marriage to her. If she marries him, he says, the Pahlav and Parsig factions can be united. The civil war can end. Azamidokt refuses. Farrukh, enraged and humiliated, has her murdered. Then he proclaims himself not as king, but as the power behind the throne, the true ruler of Persia. The Persian nobility has had enough. Farrukh Hormizd is assassinated by his own allies in 631. Boran is restored to the throne, but she is a broken woman, her power shattered. She dies of natural causes in 632, after a reign measured in months. Between 628 and 632, the Persian throne changes hands more than a dozen times. Kings are crowned and murdered within weeks. Generals revolt and are crushed. The central government ceases to function. Provincial governors, seeing the chaos in Ctesiphon, declare independence. The empire fractures. Tax. Revenue stops flowing to the capital. The army, unpaid and leaderless, dissolves. Soldiers desert and return to their homes. The Sassanid Empire, which has stood for 4 centuries, which once ruled from India to Egypt, is disintegrating. In 632, the Persian nobility makes a final desperate attempt to restore order. They find a surviving grandson of Khosrow II, a young man named Yazdegerd III, and crown him king of kings. Yazdegerd is intelligent, brave, and determined to save the empire, but he's also only about 8 years old, ruling as a figurehead over a corpse. The empire he inherits has no money, no army, and no unity. And time has run out, because while Persia tears itself apart, something new is rising in the south. In the year 632, in the Arabian city of Medina, a man named Muhammad ibn Abdullah, peace be upon him, dies. He is 62 years old. For the last decade, he has been preaching a new religion, a monotheistic faith called Islam, and uniting the fractious tribes of the Arabian Peninsula under a single banner. His followers call him the Prophet. They believe he is the final messenger of God, the seal of prophecy, the man chosen to deliver God's last revelation to humanity. When Muhammad, peace be upon him, dies, his followers do not scatter, they do not fall into chaos. Instead, they choose a successor, a caliph, to lead the community. His name is Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr makes a decision that will change the world. The Arabs will not turn inward, they will expand. They will carry the message of Islam beyond Arabia. They will conquer. The target is obvious. To the north lie two empires, Rome and Persia, exhausted by decades of war, their armies dissolved, their treasuries empty, their populations demoralized. The Arabs have watched the two giants destroy each other. Now they will claim the spoils. In 633, Arab armies begin raiding the Roman and Persian frontiers. At first, the raids are small, probing attacks, testing the defences. But the defences are not there. Roman garrisons in Syria, depleted by years of war and never fully reinforced, crumble. Persian garrisons in Mesopotamia, unpaid and leaderless, surrender or flee. The Arabs, emboldened, push deeper. In 634, the raids become a full-scale invasion. An Arab army under the command of Khalid ibn al-Walid, a brilliant general known as the Sword of God, crosses the desert and invades Roman Syria. Heraclius, now in his 60s, ill and exhausted, tries to mount a defence. He orders his generals to gather the scattered Roman forces in the east and march south to stop the Arabs. But there are no forces to gather. The soldiers who survived the Persian wars have gone home. The veterans are dead or too old to fight. The treasury is bankrupt. There is no money to hire mercenaries, no grain to feed an army. The Romans cobble together a force, maybe 30,000 men, a mix of Armenian auxiliaries, local militia and a few regular troops. They march south to meet the Arabs. The two armies collide near the town of Ajnadain in July 634. The battle is a disaster for Rome. The Arabs, highly mobile and fanatical, outmaneuver the Romans and smash their line. Thousands of Romans are killed. The survivors flee north. Syria is open. Damascus falls in September 634. The city that Shahrbaraz conquered 2 decades earlier, that Heraclius reclaimed in the peace treaty, is lost again. This time, the conquerors are not Persians but Arabs. The population, exhausted by decades of war, does not resist. Many do not even care who rules them anymore. Roman, Persian, Arab, it makes no difference. They just want the killing to stop. Heraclius, desperate, makes one last effort. He gathers every available soldier in the empire and sends them south under the command of his brother Theodore and a general named Vahan. It is the largest Roman army assembled in years, perhaps 50,000 men. They march south in the summer of 636, determined to retake Syria and drive the Arabs back into the desert. The Arabs, outnumbered, retreat toward the Yarmouk River, near the modern border between Syria and Jordan. The Romans pursue. They believe they have the Arabs trapped. On August 15th, 636, the two armies meet at the Battle of Yarmouk. The fighting lasts 6 days. It is savage, brutal, desperate. The Romans attack again and again, trying to break the Arab line. But Khalid ibn al-Walid is a genius. He holds his ground, uses the terrain, and waits for the Romans to exhaust themselves. On August 20th, a sandstorm blows in from the desert, blinding the Roman soldiers. Khalid orders a general assault. The Arabs charge, screaming, swords raised. The Roman line collapses. The retreat turns into a massacre. Roman soldiers, blinded by sand and panicked, flee toward a ravine behind the battlefield. Hundreds fall to their deaths, tumbling over cliffs they cannot see. Thousands more are cut down by Arab cavalry. Theodore, Heraclius' brother, is killed. Vahan disappears, presumably dead. By the end of the day, the Roman army has ceased to exist. 50,000 men march south. Maybe 5,000 return. The Battle of Yarmouk is the end of Roman Syria. Within months, every Roman city in the province surrenders. Antioch, Aleppo, Homs, all of them open their gates to the Arabs. In 638, Jerusalem itself falls. The city that Heraclius fought so hard to reclaim, the city where he returned the true cross in triumph, is lost. This time, it will never be Roman again. Heraclius, receiving the news in Constantinople, is a broken man. He has lived long enough to see everything he fought for turn to ash. The provinces he reclaimed at such terrible cost are gone. The true cross, returned to Jerusalem in a ceremony that was supposed to mark the rebirth of the empire, is removed after the city falls in 638. Later tradition says Heraclius had it brought back to Constantinople. After that, its trail becomes disputed, fading into fragments and competing stories. The most sacred relic in Christendom, the symbol of Christ's suffering, disappears into the chaos. It is the perfect metaphor for the collapse of the ancient world. While Rome loses Syria, Persia loses everything. In 634, the same year the Arabs invade Syria, Arab armies cross into Mesopotamia, the Persian heartland. Yazdegerd III, the young king of kings, tries to rally resistance. He sends letters to provincial governors, begging them to send troops and money. Most ignore him. The empire is too fractured, too exhausted. But Yazdegerd does not give up. He scrapes together an army, 30,000 men, and marches west to meet the Arabs. The two armies meet at the Battle of Qadisiyah in November 636, the same year as Yarmouk. The Persian army is led by a general named Rostam Farrokhzad, one of the few competent commanders left. Rostam knows the Arabs are dangerous, but he believes Persian discipline and numbers will win the day. He deploys his forces in the traditional Persian manner, heavy infantry in the centre, cavalry on the flanks, and war elephants to break the enemy line. The battle lasts 4 days. The Arabs, outnumbered and facing war elephants for the first time, are terrified. But they do not break. On the 4th day, a windstorm blows in, and chaos erupts on the battlefield. In the confusion, Rostam is killed. Some sources say he is crushed when his command pavilion collapses. Others say he is cut down by Arab soldiers while trying to flee. Either way, his death breaks the Persian army. The soldiers, seeing their commander dead, panic and run. The Arabs pursue, slaughtering thousands. The Battle of Qadisiyah is a catastrophe for Persia. 3 months later, in January 637, the Arabs besiege Ctesiphon. The Persian capital, the seat of empire for 4 centuries, is defended by a skeleton garrison and a population that has endured decades of civil war. The siege drags on for weeks. Then, in March 637, the city falls. The Arabs enter Ctesiphon, and what they find astonishes them. The royal palace, even after years of looting and civil war, is filled with treasures, gold coins in massive chests, jewels the size of eggs, silks and carpets and works of art. The most famous prize is the Spring of Khosrow, a massive carpet 60 feet long, woven with gold thread and encrusted with gems, depicting a Persian garden in spring. The Arabs, nomads from the desert, have never seen anything like it. They cut the carpet into pieces and divide it among the conquerors. Each piece is worth a fortune. The Spring of Khosrow, the symbol of Persian wealth and power, is destroyed, carved up like a piece of meat. Yazdegerd III flees east. He will spend the next 14 years running, trying to rally support, trying to raise armies, trying to save his empire. But there is nothing left to save. Province by province, Persia falls to the Arabs. The Persian nobility, exhausted and divided, either surrender or flee. There is no coordinated resistance, there is no grand last stand. The Sassanid Empire simply dissolves. Arab armies invade Egypt in 640. Alexandria, the jewel of the Mediterranean, is besieged by the Arabs in 641. The Patriarch, the same man Heraclius restored after the Persian occupation, flees again. Egypt, the breadbasket of the empire, is gone, and this time it will never return. Heraclius dies on February 11th, 641 in his palace in Constantinople. He is about 66 years old. He has ruled for 30 years, fought for 26 of them, and lived long enough to see the empire he saved collapse anyway. The official cause of death is listed as dropsy, a swelling disease, but those close to him say he died of despair. that he spent his last months in bed, refusing to eat, refusing to speak, staring at the ceiling as reports came in of city after city falling to the Arabs, that he knew Egypt was slipping away, that Alexandria was under siege and there was nothing he could do, that he wept as he watched his empire crumble. The historians will call him Heraclius the Great. They will praise his brilliance, his courage, his victories over Persia. But Heraclius dies knowing the truth, that his victories were hollow, that the war he won destroyed the world he was trying to save, that he defeated Persia only to see both empires consumed by something neither of them had anticipated. Yazdegerd III, the last king of kings, spends the 640s as a fugitive. He flees from city to city, always one step ahead of the Arab armies. He crosses into Central Asia, begging the Turks and the Chinese for help. The Tang dynasty of China, once Persia's ally, refuses to intervene. The Turkish Khaganate, exhausted by their own wars, offer sympathy but no soldiers. Yazdegerd is alone. In 651, Yazdegerd is in the city of Merv, in what is now Turkmenistan, hiding in the house of a miller. He is broke. The man who was once the king of kings, the ruler of an empire, does not have enough money to pay for food. The miller, seeing an opportunity, robs and kills him. The last Sasanian king dies in a mill, murdered by a peasant for a handful of coins. His body is thrown into a ditch. The Sassanid Empire, which ruled Persia for 4 centuries, which fought Rome for 7 centuries, ends not with a battle but with a robbery. There is no final stand, no grand defeat, just a king dying in the dirt, alone and forgotten. The Byzantine Empire survives, but barely. It loses 2/3 of its territory to the Arabs. Syria, Palestine, Egypt, Mesopotamia, all gone. The empire is reduced to Anatolia, the Balkans, and a few scattered islands. It will endure for another 800 years, slowly shrinking, always on the defensive, until Constantinople finally falls to the Ottoman Turks in 1453. But the empire of Justinian, the empire of Constantine, the empire that ruled the Mediterranean, is dead. It died in the deserts of Syria, in the ruins of Antioch, in the chaos of the 7th century. And Persia as a political entity ceases to exist. The Arab conquest is total. The Sasanian dynasty is extinct. The Zoroastrian religion, the faith of the Persian kings, is suppressed and driven underground. Persia becomes part of the Islamic Caliphate, ruled from Damascus and later Baghdad. Persian culture survives, Persian language survives, but Persian power is gone. It will not re-emerge until the 16th century, when the Safavid dynasty creates a new Persian state. But that is a different Persia, a different world. The Byzantine-Sasanian War of 602 to 628 is the suicide of empires. 2 superpowers, locked in a rivalry that stretched back 7 centuries, finally fought to the death. And when the smoke cleared, neither was left standing. They destroyed each other so completely that they could not defend themselves against a new enemy, an enemy neither of them had anticipated, an enemy that rose from the deserts and swept them both away. Historians often say that the 7th century is the end of the ancient world and the beginning of the medieval world. The division between the two is the Byzantine-Sasanian War. Before the war, the Mediterranean was dominated by Rome. The Middle East was dominated by Persia. The world was divided between Christianity and Zoroastrianism, between the eagle and the lion, between West and East. After the war, that world is gone. The Mediterranean is divided between a shrunken Byzantium and the expanding Caliphate. The Middle East is Islamic. The old order, the ancient order, the order that existed since Alexander the Great is dead. And the tragedy, the unbearable tragedy, is that it was all avoidable. If Phocas had not murdered Maurice, Khosrow might never have invaded. If Khosrow had accepted peace after Phocas's death, the war might have ended in a few years. If either side had recognized that total war would destroy them both, they might have pulled back from the brink. But they did not. Pride, revenge, ambition, fear, all the demons of human nature pushed them forward into the abyss. Rome and Persia fought for 700 years. Sometimes Rome won, sometimes Persia won. But both empires survived because neither was willing to destroy the other completely. They understood, on some level, that they needed each other, that the balance between them stabilized the ancient world, that if one fell, the other would be vulnerable. But in 602, that understanding broke. Khosrow did not want to defeat Rome. He wanted to annihilate it. And Heraclius, in response, nearly annihilated Persia. Both succeeded. Both got what they wanted. And in the end, it killed them both. The war that was supposed to restore the empire of Darius ended with Persia conquered by desert Arabs. The war that was supposed to save Rome ended with Rome losing half its territory to those same Arabs. Rome defeated Persia. Persia defeated Rome. And in the end, neither empire remained strong enough to matter. The Byzantines and the Sassanians did not lose the war. They won it. They won it so completely, so totally, so devastatingly, that they destroyed themselves in the process. And the future belonged to someone else. In the spring of 630, Emperor Heraclius stood in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem and raised the true cross above his head. The crowd wept. Priests sang hymns of thanksgiving. The emperor proclaimed that God had delivered victory, that the nightmare was over, that the Roman Empire was restored. It must have seemed, in that moment, like the world had been set right, that Rome had won. 8 years later, Jerusalem fell to the Arabs. The true cross was removed from Jerusalem and its later fate became disputed, and Heraclius died knowing that everything he fought for was lost. That is the brutal truth of the Byzantine-Sasanian War. It was not a war with winners and losers, it was a war where everyone lost. Rome lost, Persia lost, and millions of people, soldiers and civilians, Christians and Zoroastrians, Romans and Persians and Armenians and Syrians and Egyptians, people who just wanted to live their lives, raise their children, work their fields, died for nothing. The war lasted 26 years. An entire generation grew up knowing nothing but war. Children born when Phocas murdered Maurice were adults when Heraclius returned the true cross. And then those same adults watched as Arab armies swept away everything their parents had died to defend. There is a lesson in this story, if we are willing to hear it. That empires are not eternal, that power is fragile, that wars of total commitment, wars without compromise, wars driven by pride and vengeance do not have winners, only corpses. Rome and Persia believed they would last forever. They had fought for 7 centuries and survived. They were the 2 pillars of the ancient world, the eagle and the lion, locked in an eternal rivalry. Why would this war be any different? It was different because this time they did not fight for a border or a trade route or a city. They fought for annihilation, and annihilation is what they got, not from each other, but from the world they left behind, a world exhausted, traumatized, and vulnerable, a world that could not defend itself when the next threat arrived. The Byzantine-Sasanian War is a warning, a reminder that even the mightiest civilizations can destroy themselves, that some victories cost more than defeat, that wars fought without limits, without restraint, without an exit strategy, can consume everyone. Heraclius was called the New Alexander. He marched across Asia, defeated Persia, and returned home in triumph. But Alexander conquered an empire. Heraclius inherited ruins. Alexander built. Heraclius survived. And in the end, survival was not enough. The story of this war is not ancient history. It is a parable, a mirror, a question asked across 14 centuries. When 2 great powers fight for total victory, when compromise is seen as weakness, when every battle must be won and every loss must be avenged, what happens? The answer is in the ruins of Antioch, in the ashes of Dastagerd, in the disappeared true cross, in the body of Yazdegerd III lying in a ditch. The answer is that everyone loses. Rome and Persia fought for 700 years. In the end, they killed each other, and the future belonged to someone else. If you want to see more stories of empires that destroyed themselves, wars that consumed everyone, and the brutal truth of history, hit that subscribe button. Check out my videos on the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the collapse of the Mongol Empire, or the 30 Years' War that devastated Europe, because the lesson of history is always the same. Empires fall, power fades, and the wars that change the world are not always the ones that are won. Sometimes they are the ones that consume everyone. Thanks for watching. And remember, the ancient world did not fall because it was weak. It fell because it burned itself to death.